If you go back, log into Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, and go back and look at some of the TV shows from the 70s and the 80s and the early 80s, from even the 60s. I mean, like I Dream of Jeannie kind of stuff, or the Dick Van Dyke Show, or, some of the older shows, right up through the 70s. What you find is that even people who were like high up in corporations in the show, right? Bewitched, Darren, her husband, is the number 2 executive in a Madison Avenue ad agency. And they live in a normal middle-class home, as does Kate, the guy who owns the ad agency, who lives down the street. And this is how friggin' Wall Street, Madison Avenue ad agency. Those guys who own those ad agencies today have 35-bedroom mansions in the Hamptons,
Oh, yeah.
That's not what we're talking about. And the reason why, of course, is because the top income tax rate was 74% back then. But what's really interesting to actually address your question, Peter, is that if you start then watching as they get into the mid-'80s, as the Reagan Revolution was really taking hold, what you see is that suddenly the houses get bigger, the people get richer, suddenly we're in dynasty land. We're seeing, giant mansions and giant, and even the quote middle class people live in, multi-million-dollar Hollywood houses, and it's kind of been that way ever since. It's just, people are social animals, and we have this instinct to keep up with our neighbors. In fact, it's hardwired into us. There was an amazing study that they did at MSU back in the 70s, where they went around and they've got all kinds of trees around the campus. And so they went around and they added about 20% additional leaves to the nests of certain squirrels, and not to all the squirrels, right? And what they discovered was that all the other squirrels added 20% more leaves to their nests. It's like there's this instinct, oh my God, a winter must be coming, and he knows it and I don't, so I've got to do what he did. This keeping up with the Jones thing is a very mammalian thing. And so when we see these wealthy people on TV, and when we see this being lionized in our television programs and our movies, we start to think, hey, what's wrong with me? I've got to get like that, or there, et cetera. So it leads to that kind of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I just want to say the thing that bothers me the most is the disproportionality from the highest paid to the lowest paid in a company. Like, I don't care how rich the rich get. I've said it a million times. Like, that doesn't bother me. My concern is how poor the poor are, and that they don't have a minimum standard of living with dignity. Now, if that happened, and then Jeff Bezos wants to fly a giant, penis rocket in outer space, great. Have at it, man. But it's the disproportionality. Like, the bottom person should be moving up every time the top person is moving up in income. That's my thought on it. Like, I don't care how rich they are.
And that's what we had from 1930 or 1933, really, when Franklin Roosevelt took over, until the 1980s. The middle class was actually growing more rapidly than the really rich, but there was still a lot of really rich people, and they were doing very well. Thank you very much.
Right.
Well, I think we would be amiss. And obviously, we want to thank Carla Harrington very, very much for your very generous donation to the channel. How do we change this when our own party is embracing the pay-to-play system? As I'm sure you are well aware,
this is a problem.
Our friend Nina Turner was in D.C. Last week, and they had the DNC votes, the biggest one of all, which, of course, was to ban dark money in Democratic primaries. Couldn't even get a vote. And so when something like that happens,
couldn't even get a vote.
Obviously they wouldn't have a vote because they have to protect their corporate conglomerate, if you will. But do they not understand that when they start doing things like that, the more you try to resist the change from the populace that's inevitably coming, it just stirs the pot even more and gets people even more riled up. Are they like,
I know it pisses
Tom,
me off.
Yeah. I mean, are you, from your perspective, are they not aware of this, or are they really just that tone deaf and they're like, yeah, well,
dark money, it's all good.
We're corrupt, and that's that. I mean, to me, that was a really big red flag for a party that constantly wants to talk about Citizens United being the reason we can't solve anything.
Right.
Well, here's your opportunity within your own party to really make that change, and
no vote.
They refuse to do it.
If you were the coach of a football team in the NFL, and the NFL changed the rules to say whichever team gives the league the largest donation gets to have an extra 3 players on the field, would you, and you're, you were able to be the team that gave the largest donation, would you then say, no, I'm not going to have the extra 3 players on the field because we're noble? It's a real challenge. I'm not defending the DNC in this. I think it's terrible what happened. But the fact of the matter is the Supreme Court changed the rules of the game. And right now there's billions. There's going to be billions of dollars spent in the next few months going into this election. And, you can't run elections exclusively on small dollar donations off the internet. Again, I sound like I'm rationalizing the DNC. I'm absolutely not. I'm arguing that we need to change the rules. We need to get Citizens United out of the way. But if you give up your political power, if the Democratic Party just stopped running ads in a half a dozen major campaigns where they actually are using corporate money to do so, and those candidates lose to Republicans, we won't even have a democracy anymore. So I don't see any easy transitional answer to this. I mean, there's a huge push and pull here. I did a fundraiser for the Congressional Progressive Caucus about 10, maybe 12 years ago down in New Mexico when Raul Grijalva was running it. At that time, I think it had 18 members. Bernie started this thing 20 years ago. And now it's the second largest caucus in Congress. There is a movement within the Democratic Party that is having considerable success, and most of the members of the Progressive Caucus don't take corporate money. So within the Democratic Party, a lot of changes happened over the last decade in particular. And I think, frankly, more is happening very, very rapidly. But, I get it. I'm not happy about it, but I get it that they're not willing to pull the rug out from underneath themselves before they have an opportunity to gain enough power to get around some of these fools like Manchin and Sinema and actually change the rules of the game. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, actually would have changed the relationship of money and politics. This was the Democratic Party. I mean, it passed the entire House of Representatives, and only 2 senators stopped it in the Senate. So,
I'm gonna push back slightly, and I do agree with Carla. I think that it's important to recognize that this is the primary issue. And when the party does have good representation, one of the things I always like to point out about Representative Omar.
Yeah, this is for primaries we're talking about.
Yeah, one of the things that I always point out about Representative Omar is that she's a very effective legislator. And so is Ayanna Pressley. It's one thing to have, the so-called squad and the progressives on the Hill, but what are you actually doing? Like, are you getting good amendments in these bills? We know there's no standalone bills in D.C. You're never going to see them as long as the system is the way it is right now. But if there are ways to get these amendments in there, the benefits for the communities that you need, that is real, tangible change that is necessary. I have no doubt that Summerlee is probably going to do something very good as well, representing Pittsburgh. But as Jen likes to point out, there is a huge problem with organizations like AIPAC, for example. And if the dark money is allowed to flow, and I mean,
it's
millions
flowing
of dollars, again, you happen to be in a state where they tried it and they failed, because Jamie McLeod, I actually think, is also going to be a very good congressional representative. And she has really flown under the radar, maybe to her advantage, because it also is something to be said for not just kind of putting yourself out there. A lot of people don't necessarily want everyone to just be, in the spotlight, AOC style, if you will. But I really think that this core issue here, with the ability to kneecap the progressive movement by basically saying, okay, if we have to spend $5 million to stop a candidate who's got $1 million to run, if we have to spend $10 million if necessary, you saw what they did to Andy Levin in Michigan. This type of thing is going to repeat itself, and I think that's where, that's where I think Nina Turner. I think that's where the core of this issue really lies, and that's where I think we really have to be more vocal about what's going on within the party infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's something I think we could clean up if we really worked at it.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. And like I said, I mean, the first piece of legislation that passed the House of Representatives was something that got money out of politics to a large extent. I mean, it didn't completely reverse Citizens United, but it took us probably 30% down the road, which was a hell of a long way, given the situation we have right now. And, it got blocked by two neoliberal Democrats in the Senate and every single Republican. So it's, I understand what's going on. I'm not a fan of it, but
it's hard for people like we can't get a chance to even fight Republicans because we can't get to our own party. Like, we can't even get into the discussion. And that's a problem. And as much as they're sitting there now trying to seat radical MAGA people as some Pied Piper strategy, which they didn't learn failed them the first time, and you actually see them donating to these candidates again.
Pritzker donated an ungodly amount to his own opponent in Illinois.
But yet,
so bad.
Right. And it's like, but yet they won't allow progressives anything. They won't allow progressives any foothold. And the reality is progressive candidates are the ones who can better beat those Republicans.
I agree.
It goes the other way.
Yeah, although I would say that,
out the better candidates.
the party's been, very supportive of a lot of progressive candidates. And Jamie McLeod Skinner here in Oregon, for example, who you mentioned a minute ago, had the support of the party. In fact, we had a sitting Democratic member of Congress, Kurt Schrader, who is hardcore neoliberal, voted against, allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, quack, 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 quack. Mm-hmm. And 4 county Democratic parties surrounding that district and in that district and surrounding that district all endorsed Jamie over a sitting Democratic member of Congress. So, I want to see more of that kind of thing. I think that's absolutely great. And the issue was that he was taking money from corporations and she wasn't. It's great that here in Oregon, we can pull that off. And I get it that, there's not as much money sloshing around in Oregon, although we got a big problem with our governor's race right now. We got 2 billionaires in this state who have funded a former Democrat who's a hardcore neoliberal and kind of a right winger who's running as an independent. And she's probably going to pull enough votes away from a good Democrat, Tina Kotek, the former Speaker of the House, that we're going to end up with a whack job Trumpy Republican as governor.
What? But Oregon is always forefront. Like in my mind, like I always think of Oregon as like, I want that to be like what spreads. Like for me, ideal retirement is a place that recreational cannabis and death with dignity. Yeah. Both of those things simultaneously make for Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.